Hello, this is Talip Küçükcan from TRT World Forum. I would like to welcome all of you to our digital debates on the 15th of July coup attempt in Turkey. Today, we are hosting Ibrahim Kalın. He is a spokesperson to the President of Turkey. Let me introduce him to you very briefly. He is the founding director of the SETA Foundation for Political, Economic and Social Research based in Ankara. He served as its director from 2005 to 2009. He previously served as Assistant Undersecretary of State and Senior Advisor to the Prime Minister of Turkey before taking up his current post as spokesperson to the President of Turkey. He has a PhD from George Washington University. He has also taught at American universities, and he is an expert on foreign policy, and he has widely published on Islam-West relations comparative philosophy. Dr. Kalın, you are most welcome. We are very pleased to host you here. Today, we would like to talk about different aspects of the failed coup attempt on 15th of July, 4 years ago. My first question relates to the nature of the coup attempt. Turkish democratic history has been interrupted by several coups, and those coup attempts have largely succeeded. However, 15th of July failed. What is the reason behind it? Is it the political leadership? Is it the public response? Can you please tell us what is the difference between this failed coup attempt and the previous ones?
Thank you, Talib. First of all, let me express my condolences for those who lost their lives 4 years ago in defense of their country, their freedom and democracy. And I wish continued recovery for those who've been injured that day. As you know, we are going to commemorate that day tomorrow also with the participation of our president, with a ceremony starting here at the presidential complex, which was attacked by the coup plotters on that day. And then we will go to the parliament where, again, the coup plotters bombed the parliament, as never happened in our history. For the first time, unfortunately, it happened on that fateful night. And then our president will host a lunch with relatives of those who were martyred and those who were injured on that day. Now, looking back on that fateful night, what happened there and what it meant for our recent history, it was a dark night. As you have pointed out, the coup plotters, the pushists, did not shy away from using lethal force against civilians, as well as the security forces. They also attempted to kill the elected president of this country, try to overthrow the elected government of the Republic of Turkey. So when people went out to the streets that night with almost no fear, but with the possibility of getting killed, they were defending democracy, they were defending rule of law, and they were defending their country. What is different in this coup attempt in comparison to the 2 or 3 major coup attempts in Turkey, or the coups in Turkey in 1960, 1971, and 1980, was that for the first time, people had the courage and audacity to go out to the streets to defend their country, their leadership, their democracy, their parliament, their elected officials. That shows an important watershed moment in our political history. In the past, military juntas will carry out this coups to replace governments, to impose their own military agenda on the country, and usually they will use very oppressive measures to keep people at their homes, but also most importantly away from any resistance. But this time, the people of Turkey, individuals, men and women, young and old, in the cities as well as in the rural areas, professionals, teachers, ordinary people, farmers, everybody went out in defense of their democracy. That is, I think, an extremely important sociological transformation that we have to pay more attention to. What led the Turkish people on that night, July 15, 2016, to put up such a big resistance when in the previous cases there was no such outpouring of people going out on the streets and resisting the coup attempt. It's an important sociological, political development in our recent history. That is one thing that I think a lot of foreign observers, including foreign countries, have failed to understand even to this day. There are a number of factors, I believe, that we can consider to explain this new phenomenon. First of all, people's belief in democracy, in their freedom, in the constitutional rule and rule of law in the country, and basically telling everybody that anyone from within or from outside, whether from the military or like the Gulenists from other circles, under a religious or political guise, they will not let these people steal their freedom and their country. So that was a very clear message. What gave them the self-confidence is Turkey's transformation over the last 15 to 20 years. And there, it's also a sign of the deep rooting of the principles of democracy, rule of law in the country. And obviously, our president, President Erdogan, I believe deserves a major credit for this popular uprising and resistance against the coup attempt, because ever since he came to office, he has inculcated this sense of confidence and national unity and solidarity in the minds and hearts of every Turkish citizen, whether they voted for him or not, because on that day, everybody stood shoulder to shoulder against this coup attempt. His ability to give them this sense of freedom, independence, and resistance against such coup attempts or interference from outside, from military or from other circles, played an extremely important role on that night for people to have the courage to go out.
Mr. Kalın, you have briefly explained that some of the countries and the leaders in the world did not understand what has happened on that night and the response of the Turkish people. What were you expecting from the leaders from Europe, from the United States of America, in response to Turkey's defense of democracy? Because people lost their lives in defense of constitutional rights, in defense of their freedom. And how were the responses from the world outside?
The response by many countries in the West, as well as in other parts of the world, was very disappointing because, first of all, some took the wait-and-see approach. They waited for hours, even days in some cases, to see the outcome. And that sent at that time, and I think continues to send that message in the minds of many people, that they were just waiting to see who's going to win. And God forbid, had the coup been successful, they will probably have worked with the coup plotters. I don't want to make a big assumption and read too much into this, but the reality is that that's the common perception, public perception here in the country. Because when you are attacked in this way, you expect your friends, your allies to stand with you, not because of your political views, whether they agree with your policies or not, but because you are elected officials. You defend democracy, you defend the constitutional rule and rule of law in this country. And those countries that claim to be the paragons and defenders of democracy were expected, naturally and rightly, to come out with a very strong stance, not just words or statements, but with a very concrete stance against the coup plotters. That, unfortunately, did not happen in the case of some countries, and that created a sense of disappointment, and that led to the questioning of the standards of democracy, or double standards, rather, how some countries took this position of let's see if this will lead to a demise of Turkey under Erdogan. They did not act decisively for the capture of the coup plotters, many of whom fled the country on that night or in the following few days. And everybody knows where they went. And you cannot justify the presence of this people or the flight of this people to this country is in the name of freedom of travel, expression, or immunity, or refugee rights, or political asylum, etc. You wouldn't do that. These countries wouldn't do that for, say, Al-Qaeda terrorists. They wouldn't do that for Daesh terrorists. But unfortunately, some did that with FETÖ terrorists. And that, again, created a deep sense of disappointment, even resentment in the minds of many people. If you,
Mr. Kalın,
yes.
Mr. Kalın, we will come back to this issue of people who fled Turkey and took refuge in some countries. But before that, I just would like to hear from you your general assessment of Turkey's foreign policy shifts in response to such insufficient, let's say, reactions from the West when the Turkish democracy, Turkish constitutional freedoms, and also Turkish president was under attack.
Well, first of all, one of the primary goals and duties of a state is to protect its people. Therefore, national security takes precedence. And FETÖ terrorism and their coup attempt did represent at that time and continues to represent a direct national security threat to Turkey. Now, of course, the state, whatever others do, you as a state have the obligation to protect your national interest, to protect your people, your institutions, your country against such attacks. Therefore, a lot of discussions in our foreign policy relations with allies, with friends, with neighbors and other countries involved long and wide and deep discussions about how to protect your national security when you're faced with such threat. And Turkey launched investigation at home against the coup plotters, and their court cases have been held, as you know, and they've been mostly defeated and eliminated at home. But those who fled the country created serious problems between Turkey and some of its neighbors, friends, and allies. Therefore, as a national security issue, the July 15 coup attempt added a new dimension to Turkey's national security threat perception. In addition to the PKK terrorism, against which we've been fighting for the last almost 40 years, since 1984, against Al-Qaeda, Daesh, and other terrorist networks, which from time to time have carried out direct attacks on Turkish soil or attacked Turkey from Syria, Iraq, other places, and other terrorist networks such as DHKPC, other leftist terrorist organizations. So Turkey was and remains to be the only NATO country faced with three separate terrorist threats and national security threats over the last 4 or 5 years. We have the PKK terrorism, we had the Al-Qaeda, Daesh terrorism, and to this was added the FETÖ terrorism. And our expectation from NATO, for example, and our extensive discussions with our NATO allies involved, expectedly, measures to be taken against this terrorist network. When some NATO members or other allies took them in, gave them asylum, or simply allowed them to go into their countries and use their system or misuse their system against Turkey, we raised this issue. So it became an important component of our bilateral relations with a number of countries. Having said that, a number of countries cooperated with Turkey, responded very positively, some very quickly. Some of the FETÖ activities in those countries were either shut down or limited. Prosecutions began. Some members of the FETÖ terrorist network were returned to Turkey, extradited as part of the extradition agreement between Turkey and those countries. So some countries responded. Therefore, it positively, and it led to a constructive relationship. But with others, to this day, this issue remains unresolved and remains a source of tension.
Right. What is the case with the MENA region? I mean, because FETÖ organization is very well known in other countries through their educational, I think, activities and networks. So they were there before the coup attempt. To what extent their presence and existence played a role in Turkey's, let's say, shifting position in the MENA region?
It changes from one country to another. They had a strong presence in some countries. They were rather weak in some other countries. And some countries in the MENA region, in the Gulf, or right in our neighborhood or North Africa, responded very positively, either expelled them or closed down their schools because they realized how serious a threat they are, not only to Turkey, but also to their own national security. Because if a terrorist network, in the guise of, say, an educational institution or religious charity or this and that, is involved in acts of this kind, a coup attempt, and establishing a financial empire, using the judiciary, security forces to their advantage, basically undermining rule of law in the country of their origin, they can easily do this in other countries as well. And we've made it very clear to these countries that, look, they are not simply a terrorist threat or national security threat to us, to Turkey, but also to you if you allow them to fester in your midst. Therefore, some countries took decisive action, and I believe they acted in their national interest, but also by acting decisively against this terrorist network, they also improved relations with Turkey.
Mr. Kalın, you have explained that Turkey faces a number of existential threats, including from the FETÖ terrorist network. When Turkey started to take some strong measures in order to eliminate these people from the public institutions, Turkey received harsh criticism, especially from the European Union. What sort of measures you have taken in Turkey to eliminate the threat, especially from the military, from the judiciary? And what would you say to those who say that Turkey takes very strong, sometimes unfair measures to these people?
Well, any country faced with such a coup attempt, where you have 251 people killed, over 2,000 people injured, your parliament is bombed, your institutions are destroyed, people's confidence in the system is undermined. Any country faced with such a dire situation will take decisive action to eliminate this terrorist threat. Different comparisons can be given. After 9/11, the US took a number of measures to protect itself. After attacks in Europe, a number of European countries took a number of steps against Al-Qaeda, against Daesh, against neo-Nazis, against separatist terrorist networks, against this and that. It's only natural for them to take this action at home. This is what Turkey did. When you have such a cult movement, it's not even a religious movement, really, it's a cult with a lot of perverted ideas, Islamic beliefs, religious beliefs distorted, to serve one man, to serve one goal of more power, acquiring more power, in a sense, proving Nietzsche right, that is, will to power underlies the approach, the discourse, the language, the whole standing of this group. It's really more power, more political power, more financial power, more religious power to acquire. You had to take measures, obviously, to limit first and then eliminate this terrorist network. The measures that were taken within the judicial system of the country. Their court cases, judicial proceedings have been held transparently. When the court hearings began, we invited foreign observers, lawyers, journalists, and others to come and be present at this court hearing, so that they can see what's happening. And that whole process has been held transparently. The court rulings are out there, and we have largely succeeded. I think it's the collective success of the Turkish people, Turkish leadership, Turkish judicial system, that we have eliminated this terrorist network in Turkey. They don't have the presence of their militants, of their blind followers. They don't have the flow of money that they used to have. They don't have the network anymore that they used to have. And this, you will expect any country to do when they're faced with a situation like this. And this is what Turkey did. As far as the criticisms are concerned, we were again disappointed, and it was hard for us to understand that some of these countries in Europe and other places were criticizing the government for taking measures against these terrorists rather than taking measures against the terrorists themselves. And you ask the question, so who is guilty here? Like, who did this? Who killed these people? Who bombed the Turkish parliament? Who tried to assassinate the elected president of this country? And then, you wonder why they are taking this position. Is it because they don't understand what's happening? That's not really a logical explanation. The whole world has seen what happened in this country. It was very clear. For us, it was clear cut, like a daylight. I mean, it was clear that, you know, this coup plotters were intent to destroy Turkish democracy, rule of law, freedom in this country. And it was the Turkish president, it was the government, it was the people of various political views that stood against them. So instead of praising the efforts of Turkey as a whole, they began to complain about, oh, some measures are excessive, some are not within the rule of law, etc. We have seen the kind of measures that they have taken to establish public order in their countries. The problem is, you know this very well too from your experience in Europe and in the US and other places. When they do this, when they take the strict measures, it is praised as a necessity of public order. When countries like Turkey do it, it is presented as oppression or authoritarianism.
I think in France and Belgium, we have seen the examples of what you have exactly said. When there were some terrorist activities in those countries, they have really had very strong measures. I remember that right after the coup attempt, right after the failed coup attempt, the government in Turkey has started a large public diplomacy activities in the world. Parliamentarians, people from civil society, people like yourself, you have visited a number of countries and capitals. So what were the main reasons to start such kind of public diplomacy to explain what happened, and what kind of techniques, instruments, and arguments that you have employed at the time?
Well, we felt like some of our allies and friends did not understand, or were not willing to understand, the extent of what happened in Turkey. So we had to go out and explain to them. We just presented the facts of how this terrorist network organized itself and hid itself in the state institutions in the country for the last 40 years, how they took control of a large number of security forces, the judiciary, the financial world, how they established this a huge empire of schools, of money, of operatives, of secret agents here and there, and their so-called hidden imams, and how they manipulated Islamic belief to present themselves as a movement for charity, for religious education, etc. How they use techniques of what is called dissimulation, how they mask themselves behind such nice words as dialogue and peace and coexistence and so on and so forth. We felt like, we had to explain all this. And in fact, European countries have some similar examples in their history. If you look at some secretive movements in Europe, some lodges and some secretive underground movements, I mean, they know very well that these groups can be lethal, can be a serious threat, but none has reached the level that FETÖ reached in Turkey. So, I mean, they felt like they are so powerful that they can impose any of their ideas or wishes on an elected government, force civil servants not to serve the country, not to go by the rule of law by which they are bound, but to advance their own perverted agenda. So we had to explain all this. I believe we, all of us, I mean everybody, tried their best to explain the political context, the historical context, the social context for this. And I believe those who had open mind and good intentions received the message. They understood the gravity of what happened in the country. And it was not just about, say, that night, but it was about containing such venomous movement and ideas, such pernicious ideas, perverted beliefs that we had to fight against. But some who had a different political agenda thought that it was just the government trying to justify, its excessive measures at home in Turkey, but by looking at it from this rather cynical point of view, they ended up willingly or unwillingly, siding with the FETÖ terrorists. And to this day, again, 4 years after the coup, unfortunately, some key allies in NATO, some key countries in Europe, including the United States, continue to fail to understand the gravity of what happened and why we had to take the measures that we had to take.
Mr. Kalın, as you have rightly said, especially European Union is also not very willing to understand the case. Given the fact that Turkey and European Union cooperate on many issues like migration, the security issues, but when it comes to FETÖ terrorists and their asylum in some of the European countries, why do you think there is a unwillingness on the European side? Is it because just the human rights issues, democracy issues, or there is a wider context where there are some disagreements between European Union and Turkey in the Mediterranean, in Libya, in other areas?
Well, first of all, Turkey takes the national security threats of its neighbors, allies, and friends very seriously. And naturally, it expects them to do the same. So when a country, any country, I don't want to name names here, but any country in the West or in the East or South or North, whatever, is faced with a terrorist threat, we take it very seriously. We do our best to cooperate. We do not allow those who attack that country to come to our country and use our country as a launching pad against that country. We do not allow them to run smear campaigns against that other country. That's why we've given this very strong fight against Al-Qaeda, against Daesh, against any other threat that may pose a threat, to say Western countries or others. But when it comes to Turkey's national security threat perception and threat reality, we do not see the kind of cooperation that we expect from them. There might be political reasons for this. In statecraft, sometimes you're faced with such situations. In the name of realpolitik, they try to use your enemies against you, or they try to take advantage of these groups to create pressure, to put pressure on that country, Turkey in this case. But I believe all these policies are self-defeating, because you end up allowing your country to have a terrorist network fighting against another country, but at the end, they pose a threat to your national security, to your rule of law, and we've seen this in some other countries. Of course, these FETÖ operatives and terrorists move rather smart, in Western countries. They continue to present themselves as this peaceful, religious charity and educational institution and so on and so forth. But I believe deep down, Europeans, those who have the knowledge, the mind, the perspicacity, the understanding, know exactly who these people are, what they're doing. It's no excuse to say that, well, they are not breaking any laws in our country. Well, you wouldn't allow Al-Qaeda or Daesh sympathizers or operatives or terrorists just because they give the appearance that they are not breaking the law in your country. You know that it's a threat today or tomorrow or 5 years down the road. They're going to a big problem. So they take every possible measure within the rule of law to not give them any breathing space. So we expect them to do the same. But unfortunately, they continue to fail to understand how serious a threat this is for Turkey. Sometimes they try to identify this as an issue of personal revenge for President Erdogan. Look, on that night, they sought to assassinate the elected president of this country and his family. But also, they aimed at Turkish democracy. They aimed at this country. They killed civilians. This is a criminal act. This is terrorism by any definition. So putting aside your political differences with President Erdogan, with Turkey's government on this issue, on that issue, you cannot use them as a justification to allow or to legitimate the presence of this terrorist elements in your country, because two wrongs do not make one right.
Mr. Kalın, as a diplomat, you don't want to name countries, but I will, if you allow me, because the leader of that organization, Fethullah Gülen, lives in the United States of America. And Turkey provided, I think, ample evidence as to his role in the coup attempt, but the United States of America is not willing to extradite him. Why do you think they don't want to extradite him? And I mean, what is their explanation to you as an official?
This is a legacy of the Obama administration with which we've had extensive talks, conversations. We presented them with all sorts of evidence, factual evidence, facts. The correspondence on that night between FETÖ operatives, their writings, their testimonies, their confessions, the court rulings, everything that will count as evidence in any court anywhere in the world. As I said, if another country or us was to present half of or even 1/3 of what we presented for FETÖ, for another terrorist organization, they will have shut them down, they will have extradited them. For no other reason than the fact that why should that be an issue between, say, Turkey and the United States? Because a lot of people here in Turkey, again, believe that by harboring these people in their country, the United States is giving them a safe haven and allowing them to use the United States, their system, or misuse them, manipulate it, against Turkey. And they run all kinds of smear campaigns against Turkey to undermine Turkish-American relations. They go out to the Congress, and some of their shady and even criminal activities in terms of financing the US politics. I don't want to go into details, but those who know what I'm talking about, are well known. They're out there. In fact, they're crimes by US laws. So in addition to the evidence that we provide, they're also breaking the law in that country, in the US and other European countries. So why should that be an issue between Turkey and the United States when the United States can simply get rid of these people and they will come and have a trial here? And we've said that, like the other trials that we've had, they will be put on trial for their crimes. For the vast majority of the Turkish people, the response of foreign countries to the FETÖ threat after especially the July 15 coup attempt became a litmus test, not only for bilateral relations between Turkey and that country, but also how they treat an ally, a friend, a strategic partner. That shapes perception, and perceptions lead to action. If you ask anyone in Turkey, regardless of their political view, right, left, AKP or anti-AKP, pro-Erdogan or anti-Erdogan, across the board, they will identify all these countries harboring terrorist FETÖ members as providing a safe haven, supporting them, nourishing them, allowing them to do all kinds of activities against Turkey. Why have all these problems between Turkey, such a key NATO ally, and other allies and strategic partners? I fail to understand the logic behind all this. Some may say, well, again, it's part of this. Let's use them against Turkey as a leverage, etc. But given the determination of the Turkish people and the strong position that the Turkish leadership has taken and will continue to take against these terrorists, those tactics or strategies are doomed to fail.
Well, then how the presence of leader of this organization in the US is poisoning Turkey's, I mean, you have really explained how it poisons Turkish-US relations, but I think it seems that there are implications for other areas, like Turkey's position in Syria, Turkey's position in Eastern Mediterranean, on other areas. I mean, to what extent the harboring of FETÖ by US influences the relations between these two key allies?
They continue to run free. engage in all kinds of smear campaigns, make money in that country through charter schools and other companies, some of which have gone into trouble because they've broken the law in the US, and use all these resources to launch campaigns against Turkey. Does that help Turkish-US relations? It doesn't. They try to poison perception of Turkey in the US by putting out, outright lies, propaganda stuff to American public, which doesn't know much about Turkey or this part of the world, try to shape their perception. It doesn't help in any way. That's why we have presented all this evidence. Our justice ministers, our foreign minister, and many other ministers, our president, myself, we've been involved in many talks with them about this issue. And we've always told them, look, put yourself in our shoes. If you had a coup attempt in your country, in the United States, and it failed, and those who carried out that coup fled to Turkey or to Canada or to Mexico, and they continued their activities against your country from those neighboring countries or from Turkey, what will you do? What kind of measures will you take? If a group of people came and bombed the US Senate, US Congress, and if another country took them in the name of political asylum, political rights, etc., what kind of measures will you take? Will you just let them stay there? And will you just say, well, what can we do? They have their own laws, we cannot convince them. No, you will do everything in your capacity to bring them to justice.
Mr. Kalın, we have got only a few minutes more. My last question is about the media coverage of the coup attempt in Turkey and what followed. What is your view of the Western media's position on this issue? How they covered the media, the coup attempt in Turkey, and what is your response to that?
Unfortunately, it's part of a pattern that you see in the Western media coverage of Turkey and the region, I will say. It's selective, it's skewed, it's based on double standards, it's designed to advance certain political ideas rather than present facts. Of course, I have greatest respect for those journalists who do their job professionally, present the facts. I have no criticism against them, and they have the right to criticize our policies. That's fine. But even sometimes you run into a problem or situation where you're surprised and utterly disappointed to see that they even fail to get the simple facts of what happened, and they fail to present these facts to these readers. And they do a disservice, to their audiences by misrepresenting facts or selecting them or presenting them in a selective manner. We have our share of this general problem, unfortunately, not only in regards to FETÖ, but in regards to our policies in Syria, against our fight in our fights against Daesh, Al-Qaeda, PKK terrorism, a number of other issues. But on that particular issue, again, a number of journalists, I think, have done an excellent job in terms of presenting the facts and getting the Turkish political pulse and feelings across the countries, across the transatlantic, to their readers in a way that should be done by any journalist. But then there have been times where you see ideology taking over facts, narrow political perspective taking over the reality on the ground. And I believe at the end of the day, such coverage fails to properly understand and present the facts, just the simple facts about the July 15 coup attempt, what happened before, and what unfolded afterwards.
Dr. İbrahim Kalın, spokesperson to the President of Turkey. Thank you very much for joining us today. I would like to thank you on behalf of myself, on behalf of TRT World Forum, and on behalf of our audience. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me on. Thanks.